Okay, hey, I'm Meg Eagle, and this is Krushinator. Krushinator, why don't you introduce yourself to some of the people who might not know who you are?
Hey there, I'm Krushinator. I'm a Heroes of the Storm caster, mostly with the Nexus gaming series. I've been casting since season 9. We're heading into season 11 coming up, and I'm currently the head caster for the organization.
Okay, awesome. Um, so at any point, if you don't want to answer a question for whatever reason, you don't need to give a reason, just feel free to ask me and skip over it.
Sure.
When did you start playing Heroes of the Storm?
I started playing shortly after release. I was aware of the game during the beta. I was listening to podcasts, catching streams now and again, but I was sort of caught up in the anti-MOBA rhetoric. Like it was just a lot of people talking about League of Legends and oh, it's so toxic and people are really mean. So I was like, oh, I'm just gonna experience it from afar. But once I saw the game, it came out. I was like, it's Blizzard. It's not going to be so bad, right? And I jumped in, and I've been pretty much playing ever since.
Uh, were you always a fan of Blizzard games, or
Yeah.
was
So I've been playing World of Warcraft since 2007.
okay?
And that was pretty much the only game I played for quite a long time. And then, over time, I started getting into StarCraft a little bit. I played some Diablo. I was playing Overwatch when it came out. But Heroes has been the one that's sort of stuck with me the most lately as a main game. I mean, World of Warcraft's always going to be there. But I've been playing it for so long at this point, and since I'm not raiding anymore, Heroes is kind of my competitive game. It's my try hard game.
Okay. Um, how'd you get started in casting then?
I started casting, so this was earlier in 2020. I had just heard about the next gaming series at all through Valcomer with the Can't Counterpick Stupid organization. He's listens to Into the Nexus, a podcast I've been following for quite a while, and I was in their Discord expressing some interest in, I've been playing solo in Storm League, and there's this and that, there's problems with it. And he said, well, there's an organization where amateurs can play in groups. I was like, oh, that sounds interesting, and I joined a team for season 9. About halfway through that season, I sort of made a promise with one of my teammates that we were both going to start casting together. It had been something that had interested me in general since watching HGC, just watching them do it, watching esports casters in general. I had started up a solo podcast earlier in 2019. So I felt pretty comfortable with like my speech, my knowledge of the game, and just seeing other casters in the NGS be able to just go in there and do it. There weren't people out there like severely judging their abilities. Everyone was just happy to have casters, and it felt like a really accepting environment to give it a try.
That's awesome. If you don't mind me asking, could I talk to you about that team you were on for season 9?
Yeah, so I joined a team called. We ended up being called Kael'thas Can't Spell, and it was Kael'thas spelled with a C. We ended up in Division D, D East. We didn't end up doing too well. I think we were ninth or 10th out of 13 in that division. There were a couple of roster problems. The guy who actually started the team ended up having to bail before the season even started because of changes at work. So we were finding our footing and things were getting better towards the end of the season. But overall, it didn't go terribly well, and the team ended up disbanding for season 10.
Did your friend also start casting? That you
Yeah,
recruited?
so she got in there and she did a whole bunch of games. She's not casting currently, but man, I think she might have done close to 30 games in season 9. She was doing a whole lot of work.
Okay. What are your favorite kind of matches to cast? What are
Favorite kind of matches? I'd like to see matches. I mean, it's nice when the teams are close, obviously, but I like to see ones with picks that you don't normally see, like where the bands change up each game, the teams are reacting to each other, the teams are changing their strategies on the fly rather than just going, we research the team, these are our 3 bands, and we're going to play this comp for 2 to 3 games. I mean, that's nice from a competitive perspective and trying to do your best. But I think Heroes of the Storm is best when the teams are really reacting throughout a series.
Just from looking at from history with other esports, would you say that happens more often in longer series, like best of fives, rather than best of threes, or is it just like if it happens, it happens?
I think it's really more to do with the teams than the state of the series.
Okay.
In NGS, there aren't a lot of best of fives to begin with. So we mostly see the best of threes. But even in some best of fives, you'll get 2 teams that just go, this is our best game plan. We're going to ban the stuff that messes up our game plan, and that's going to be the play. But occasionally you'll get teams that have really wide draft pools that like to bring out different pocket picks for different maps. And I think those are the most interesting series to see, whether they're best of 3 or 5.
I'm kind of curious. What do you think about double healer comps? Does that fit the unconventional kind of Krushinator's excited to watch, or is that more? Well, some people hate double healer comps, so.
I think right now double healer is in a better place than it was before. So there was the infamous time, I want to say end of 2018 or 2017. I can't remember the year it was, where we had to come out of the Christmas break and have the huge set of healer changes. I think the problem in double healer meta at that time was you didn't have to give up anything to go double healer. You could go into heavy wave clear maps or heavy point control maps and take double healer and still be just fine. With the current meta and a lot of wave clear taken away from healers, that's a significant disadvantage that a double healer comp will have to go. So if you're going double healer, but you're on Tomb of the Spider Queen, you're on Infernal Shrines, you're going to end up being beaten by a team that just plays macro and plays the map. And I feel like that's not something that used to be the case with double healer, but is the case now. So I don't feel like it's an unfun draft strategy. I think it's something that you can go and still has counterplay, but there are maps for it and there are situations for it draft wise.
Okay. So you're talking about maps. What is your favorite map to cast?
My favorite map to cast, honestly, is probably Tomb of the Spider Queen. It's a really small map, and there are a lot of individual strategies that will work. Like wave clear is important on Tomb of the Spider Queen, no doubt about it. But there's so much vision control that can take place. There's so much point control that can take place. And I think watching how teams interact in the early game is one of the more interesting things about Tomb. Because what a lot of people understand about Tomb of the Spider Queen right now is the first turn in of the game is generally not that powerful. It goes out there, the web weavers are fairly low health, they often don't get a lot done. But if you can get 2 turn-ins in a row to start, that's really powerful. And if you can get the second and the third turn-in of the game, that's also really powerful. So you'll see some teams who don't go for the first turn-in at all and try to just go for the next 2. You'll see some teams try to get the first 2 turn-ins, which is pretty difficult to do, but it is doable in some comps. You'll see some teams that just hold on to their gems forever. They take a lot of anti-siege and wave clear and just sit on like 120 gems and go for something like a triple turn-in the late game. And it's really interesting to see how teams like to approach that map.
Okay. Out of curiosity, do you know does Tomb of the Spider Queen, does it scale with how many turn-ins happen, the objective, or does it scale with time? Because I always thought it scaled with time.
I think it's just time. The reason that the first turn-in on Tomb of the Spider Queen is almost universally viewed as weak is because both teams will have the gems to turn in very early in the game. So you'd have to make a conscious decision to sit there and not turn in, which is something you definitely aren't going to see in Stormleague. People have gems turn in, but it's also just it's a totally valid strategy to get an early turn in and then try to hold the 2 vision points to get the second turn in. So it's pretty rare that both teams try not to get an early turn in. And also, holding on to gems is risky. If you're sitting there on a very small map with a lot of corridors, a lot of vents, and you're just building that gem count, one bad pick and you've lost all of the gems that you've been holding that whole time. So balancing the risk of a double or triple turn in strategy with losing it all on one bad rotation is really what I find interesting about casting it.
Okay. Uh, so I know Tomb of the Spider Queen. A hero that comes to mind is Cho'Gall. Is Cho'Gall one of your favorite heroes to cast, or would you say you have a different favorite hero to cast?
I think some of my favorite heroes to cast are the melee assassins because they play in such a risky way. And often when you see the melee assassins come out, it's not just, oh, there's a meta melee assassin and you just pick them when it's time to pick them. You often get heroes that are flex players, heroes that are a little bit more draft conscious, who look for the opportunities to bring out stuff like an Alarak or a Maiev or a Kira. And because I don't get to see them so often, and it enables strategies that I don't get to see that often, I find those players very interesting to watch.
Okay. So no Butcher. There's no hope for a Butcher, is what you're saying?
Butcher is probably the most situational, besides maybe Illidan, of the melee assassins right now. There are definitely compositions you can pick Butcher into where you'll just win outright. Like if the enemy team doesn't take any knockbacks, doesn't take any reliable stuns, and you're on a map with open lanes, Butcher just runs you over because his charge range is so far away. It's an unstoppable that's going to lock on. It's really a feast or famine type of hero, but he doesn't really provide a lot other than that. Like you've got your Kiras, they can move in from a distance. They are better at dueling out in the open. Alaraks bring the silence. They've got a good protect on the heroic. Illidan can do macro stuff before going in for the engage, whereas Butcher just kills heroes. And there's a lot of different heroes in a draft that can do that where you don't have to take the Butcher.
Okay. What are your least favorite kind of matches to cast?
I think probably just general mismatches where it becomes clear as the game goes on, the draft didn't really matter. The map choice didn't really matter. It's just one team is straight up better than the other. Now, what's nice about NGS is I find that the placement committee does a really good job of making sure those matches are few and far between. There's very few matches that I end up casting that are in that vein where one team is just clearly superior no matter what they happen to choose. And it's nice to not have to run into that very often at all.
Okay. Speaking of you casting, what do you think your strengths are as a caster, and why should people listen to your casts?
I think one of my main strengths as a caster is just my manner of speaking. A lot of people have told me they just like hearing the sound of my voice. I can speak clearly and quickly. I've got a good knowledge of the game, so I'm not often stumbling over words or talents or hero abilities very often. So I think I've got that going for me in a cast, as well as my just my production value. I've been streaming for a number of years now, so I've got good control of the overlays. All my audio levels have been checked and rechecked over time, so I've just got a good production when I go live. And overall, I'd say one thing that other people will have over me in the casting department is just general game experience and high level game knowledge. Like you'll get casters who have been doing it for a very long time and not just doing amateur competition. They'll have been doing like professional scrims, doing, pre HGC amateur stuff, and they'll just have access to a broader knowledge base than I do. So I feel like I'm still, I mean, Heroes of the Storm is a game where you're almost constantly learning. That's sort of how MOBAs tend to go. You experience new things over time, but there's casters out there who have that experience that I don't, and that's something that I'm building up over time.
Right. So for the casters newer than you, the up and coming casters, you're the head caster for NGS. So,
Mhm.
do you have any tips for them?
I think the number one thing that I tell new casters is it's not so much important to get every single thing you say right. What's more important is to show your passion for the game, show your passion for the community, and just provide a positive Heroes of the Storm experience. Like these are the majority of the casts anyone in NGS or really anyone in Heroes of the Storm is going to do are amateurs. It's just players in the community out there doing their best and having a good time. So spending the time to showcase good plays, make comments like that was a great play there and that's an interesting strategy there, just ends up making people feel good about the game. I feel like sometimes people watch professional casts or casts of pros by ex pros, and they have an amount of knowledge that allows them to effectively criticize the game at hand, which is it's nice from an educational perspective, but sometimes that's really not what an amateur competition needs. They need someone who's hype on the desk, who's calling out the great plays, the cool decisions, things like that. And I feel like for NGS, for amateur competition in general, trying to move away from like talent criticism or pointing out all the errors all the time, just pointing out the positive aspects is where I tell new casters to start when it comes to heroes.
I think that's a really great point. Um, so, would you recommend that if they, let's say, caster, I don't know, Michael, is casting a match and he sees a talent choice that is a bit, to his knowledge, unconventional? What should he even comment that that to him it's unconventional, but like praise, like okay, this let's see how this works out for them, or should he just avoid it? If you see what I'm saying.
So in that situation, what I will like to do, if it's a situation where like there's not a lot going on and I feel like I've got something interesting to talk about with the talent and it's not like the meta choice, or even if I look at it and just think, I don't think that's a good choice, or I'm not sure why they wouldn't stack it with this other talent or this other hero, I'll take the opportunity to just talk about the talent in general and what the talent is good at, and then theorize what that player may be trying to accomplish with that talent. And that sort of gives a theory crafting perspective to the choice, and it keeps things positive for the amateur competition.
Okay. Are there any teams that maybe they do that a lot, or that you would recommend viewers check out their games?
In terms of alternate picks and whatnot, I wouldn't say that there's a particular amateur team that really exemplifies that. In terms of more professional type play, I think we've all, if you've been watching CCL, people talk a lot about Wild Heart Esports and their drafting philosophy, just how they approach tanking, how they approach team comps. And one thing I'll definitely see a lot in chat rooms for bigger competitions or professional competitions is chat just has one idea of how to build a character. And they'll just be talking about like why this talent, why that talent. And when it comes to team play, I think it's really important to not just look at the one talent on the one hero, but look how it interacts with the rest of the team. So, I mean, something like Tychus. Tychus is played a lot in all levels of play right now. Most Tychuses end up choosing Commandeer Odin. But Commandeer Odin is a really good sieging tool. If your team already has a lot of good building siege and you need something like point control, Draken Laser Drill can provide that where Odin can't. Or say the enemy team has an ETC and you're the only person with a ranged interrupt on your W grenade, you can't use that while you're in Odin. So being able to examine those sorts of choices from a team perspective, I think ultimately will prove to be beneficial. And there's some teams that you'll see that a lot more than others. And I think Wildheart in CCL is a great example of that.
Okay. Um, So, are there any sleeper picks you think that are being undervalued by the community right now?
Being undervalued as a pick. I think right now it takes a very skilled hand, but Kira is very, very good on maps where you end up dueling a lot or maps where you end up with a lot of extra space to work. So stuff like Hanamura, stuff like Dragonshire, maps where you're not necessarily all in the same place at the same time. Kira was nearly unpickable for the longest time while we were still had the Gladiator's medallion in the game
Right.
because you could just press a button and drop Kira off wherever you happen to want to.
Right, with the
But
her E, the spinning
yeah,
revolving
so her
sweep.
it's revolving strike or something like that,
Yeah.
where she puts out the E and starts spinning around you while invulnerable. While every single hero had a self cleanse, Kira's were really, really struggling. But now that that's gone, and really the biggest, I hesitate to say meta healers because every meta is different, every level is different. But your healers like Stukov, like Deckard, ones that you see just all the time, don't have a cleanse. They have very, very powerful tools for a team fight and for peeling, but a cleanse is something that they don't have. And if you don't have a cleanse and you don't have a medallion, Kira's value really, really goes up. And I think as the as the season goes on, you may see more Kira mains start to come back where they had real problems in season 10.
Right. Okay, so what's your favorite hero to play?
I think it's a tough choice. I hover between Artanis and Gul'dan. I'll play those two anytime. Artanis is in a little bit of a rough spot right now. Doesn't have a lot of good offlane matchups. He doesn't offer a tremendous amount to a team fight unless you need a big blind. But right now, I'd say I'm playing more Gul'dan than anything.
Okay. Why Gul'dan, if I might ask?
Personally, I really like Gul'dan's health and mana control. Being able to structure your talents and use your trait and your W just to make it so you're always out on the battlefield, you're always casting, and you're never really worried about your mana and health totals. I found that really, really appealing for a mage. Because a lot of mages are fairly mana hungry. They're a little bit, you can't just cast all the time because you'll have to end up going back to base. But Gul'dan let me stay out on the battlefield, and that was super appealing to me when I picked him up.
Awesome. Are there any Blizzard characters you'd like to see implemented into Heroes of the Storm, or any mechanical niches you feel aren't fulfilled currently?
Mechanical niches not fulfilled currently. I mean, the one that I think would be the most interesting addition to Heroes that we've already heard is an incredibly difficult task engineering wise is Reinhardt. And that mechanic is the directional shield. Like just thinking of a shield that blocks auto attacks on a certain part of the battlefield or projectiles that travel and you have to angle the shield sounds super, super interesting. But just trying to imagine how to code that would be just an absolute nightmare. So, like in Fantasyland, where I get to just have whatever I want and works perfectly, I'd love to see Reinhardt enter the game. But I totally understand why that doesn't really work out for a MOBA.
Okay. So aside from adding Reinhardt, is there anything you'd like to see Blizzard do for the game?
There's a lot of systems that they in the past that ended up not panning out. I think the one thing that I still think we could have and could be possible given the team's resources is proper guilds or clans. I think it's not even like the main thing that I really want from that aspect is just in-game chat channels that can be moderated. There's so many different communities out there, streamers, podcasters who have in-game channels that they run to do viewer games, to get groups together. And sometimes, especially from the big ones, you'll get trolls out there in the community who just go in there and make those channels uninhabitable with whatever they're posting or whatever they're saying. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's just an open chat channel that anyone can join. So
Okay.
just having some way to create a chat channel with moderators, with controls, I think would be a huge boon to a lot of communities around Heroes of the Storm.
All right. So when you're not casting or playing Heroes of the Storm, what do you like to do for fun?
When I'm not casting or playing heroes, I mean that sort of changed a lot in 2020 just because of the limitations on where we were going to go. Usually, my year consists of playing pool down at the bar, playing golf. I did get to play golf this year. Softball in the summer, refereeing basketball in the winter. But the majority of those things, we just couldn't do this year.
Right.
So what I ended up doing was just playing a whole lot more heroes. I had extra time to kill, I had extra time to invest, and I got into this game in a bigger way than I ever had before.
Nice. With the casting and you mentioned a podcast actually a little bit earlier. I probably should have asked about that. My bad. What podcast is it? What's it called? And what do you talk about on it?
So I ran, I think it was either 14 or 15 episodes of a solo podcast called Crush's Cavern. It's currently inactive, but it wasn't really video game related. It was just something that I was doing to try to get some experience in podcasting. I would talk about different topics that I felt like I had some expertise on, maybe, personal development or motivational type work. But it ended up being fairly short-lived, but it was a good experience for me to sort of be able to create some alternate forms of content. I'd been streaming on and off for a number of years, and I was starting to think about, do I get into the YouTube game? Maybe podcasting is my thing. So I tried a few different things. The podcast ended up falling through, but the casting has been really, really good since I started picking it up.
Nice. So is there anything you want to say to fans that you have?
To the people that are coming out to my cast that aren't just coming out to the teams they want to watch, that's a significant part of the audience, of course, is I'll be casting a particular team that viewers want to watch. But there are people out there who will just come out to see whichever teams I'm casting. And to those people, I can't thank them enough. Like just having you in the chat consistently, saying hi, conversing with the viewers, engaging with the stream is such a huge motivation for me to continue and just try to get better at what I'm doing and do more of what I'm doing. So thank you so much for your support out there.
That's awesome. Okay, so would you like to plug yourself or say what your socials are? And also message me with the links on Discord and I'll post them in the article in case anyone doesn't want to listen to the end.
Absolutely. You'll find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/the Krushinator. You'll find me casting Heroes of the Storm. I'm playing a lot more now since I've got the team rebuilt, going back in for Season 11. So you'll catch me in practices and scrims as well as casting as often as I can, sort of waiting for Season 11 of NGS to get started up. So give me a follow over there to see when I go live. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, same handle at the Krushinator. And every cast that I do, I post onto YouTube in a condensed, spoiler-free VOD. So like all the mid parts are taken out, any pauses that happen in the game are removed, and I add time to the end to make sure that you don't know whether it was a 2-0 or a 2-1. It's always going to be spoiler-free. So just search for the Krushinator on YouTube, and you'll see all the casts that I do.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.